Okay, but I guess I can introduce you. Michael, this is Michael White. I have known him for a very long time. I've moved to Florida in 2006. I had originated up in Ohio for a handful of years before that. And I think I met you relatively soon after that. I think it was around like 2007, where I had met you. 2007, 2008. So 15 years went fast. Now I have almost as many gray hairs as you do. So.
Not quite.
But Michael's our most experienced appraiser. I mean, I don't know what you're at, 40 plus years.
Correct.
Okay, so yeah, been around the block. He was my boy when I used to be able to pick out the appraiser back in the day that I could pick out whatever appraiser I wanted to use. He was my boy that I picked all the time. So yeah, he worked some miracles in the past, and yeah, so Michael, you wanted to share with us, something, any new topics, anything new that you're seeing, issues you're running into, like are values going up, values going down,
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. First, let me say good morning to everybody. Thank you for your time and for coming into my office / man cave. I have been in this little area here, which is part of a converted garage, for 20 plus years. And as Shawn mentioned, I started appraising in 1979. So with the clock turned into 2023, it puts me at 44 years, which is pretty crazy when I think about it.
Hopefully you get permits to convert your garage.
No, we won't go there.
All right.
I did have a licensed electrician do it. And that would have been the only reason we put a couple of outlets in. But yeah, it's this would not fall into the duck theory of, if it looks like a duck and waddles like a duck and quacks like a duck and smells like a duck, it must be a duck. No, you would never be able to tell that this used to be a garage, with the exception of the driveway coming up to the, as you can see behind me, I put a bay window on and all of that. So let me segue real quick into that. I don't know, how many do we have here? I'm seeing Bill, Celeste isn't in yet.
You have 19 people on here so far. And people,
okay.
And then I'll
real quick, it seems to be an ongoing discussion, no matter who and when and where. The topic of porch enclosures, garage enclosures, what makes living area, what doesn't make living area. Just a quick side note here. I always use the duck theory, as you just heard me say. If it looks like a duck, waddles like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So when you walk from that room, or that kitchen, or that living room, or that family room, out through double doors, and you step into the room and it looks like it used to be a porch, that's what it is. It's an enclosed porch. Doesn't matter necessarily if it has drywall, if it's air conditioned. There are other issues that go along. Same with the garage. If you walk through that laundry room door into that big bonus room and it looks like it used to be a garage, it's a converted garage, not necessarily living area. So when you're going out to get your listings, when you're walking through potential clients' homes, one thing you should always have with you is the property appraiser's printout of the floor plan, which, by the way, if you haven't been to their website lately, they have just completely revamped how the floor plans appear on the property appraiser's website. It's an improvement for sure, but you should have that with you so that when you're walking that potential client's house, even if you're with a buyer and you're not representing the seller and you're walking the property, walking the house, you can see where conversions have occurred, and it will help you much better interact with and explain why that's not necessarily living area. Another item to consider with that is let's take a two-car garage, for example. They're typically anywhere from 400 to 550 square feet. If you have an air conditioning system that is only set up to handle 1,400 square feet, and you add an additional 500 square feet, if that air conditioning system has not been updated, then it's going to be, you're going to have an issue with that air conditioner. Was there a question?
I don't think so. I think somebody.
Okay. Okay. So these are just little things that I throw out when I'm interacting with real estate agents, whether it be at the property or on a Zoom or in the training room. And invariably that will come up, you know, this appraiser did this and this appraiser did that. And, you know, it's, we all see things differently.
How do you know not that
Go
the
ahead.
is not equipped to handle the additional?
Well, here's what I usually do. And it's not that I'm trying to do a pop quiz or a trick question, but I will ask ahead of time, when was the air conditioning system updated? And they'll say whatever they're going to say. And so then I say, when was this room converted? Well, if that's after the air conditioning system was upgraded, then I already know that it has not been updated to handle that additional room, which tells me a permit was not pulled as well, because the building planning and building people are going to require an upgrade as part of the inspection permitting process. So, you know, again, it's very simple. If you walk into that room, whatever it is, and it looks like it used to be something else, then it's an enclosed something else, if that makes sense. It does not automatically make it living area. That's where an appraiser comes in. If you're not sure, I will also come out and do what I call a sketch report. If you get a really awkward house, a unique house, a big house, something that looks different from what the property appraiser is telling you, for $175, I'll come out, I'll measure and make notes, do a floor plan just like I would for a mortgage loan. And then you can say in your listing that the square footage was not provided by the owner, not provided by the builder, not from public records. You can actually put that it was measured or an appraiser provided. We're running into a lot of issues with square footage errors. From what I hear, April 1st of 2022, we had to start doing what's called the ANSI method of calculating square footage. And every appraiser in the United States is supposed to be doing it this way. And we have to make a statement in our reports how we calculated that square footage. If you're not measuring, then you're relying on the county property appraiser or somebody else's measurements. And if we make that statement saying I personally measured and here's how I'm calculating the square footage, then somebody is not being honest with what they're saying. So is there any questions, any concerns about what I've shared so far with that before I move on?
That's on every loan type, whether it's a conventional or FHA loan, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's getting to the point now where conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, the appraisal inspection is getting pretty close to being the same for all of them. There are a few things on conventional that we don't have to necessarily report, but if it's a safety issue, if it's a security issue, if it's a structural soundness issue, it doesn't matter what the loan is, we're required to disclose it. And sometimes we have to go to the lender before we even start on the report after our inspection and tell them, this is what we've seen. How do you want me to handle it? Do you want me to move forward or what have you? And then they'll say whatever it is that they're going to say. So I try to do almost a complete FHA inspection no matter what. Why? Because if it converts to FHA, then I don't necessarily have to go back to the property. The attic inspection is an issue. I don't always inspect the attic on a conventional loan appraisal. But if there's issues with the roof, if the roof looks old, if it appears to be at the end of its physical life, which is the same with an air conditioning system, by the way, then I will start asking a lot of questions. And if it looks like the AC is 25 years old and the roof is 25 years old, then you know, those two components are definitely nearing or at the end of their physical life. And I won't necessarily call for replacement, but it affects the condition rating, the overall condition rating of the improvements.
I had a question from a realtor. So basically the seller died in the middle of redoing his kitchen. And basically everything was done with the exception of just the flooring in the kitchen. Like everything else in the house is done. The flooring in the kitchen, it's just concrete. I had checked with our appraisal department. I was like, hey, do they have to finish the flooring in the kitchen? And the one lady had said they didn't, flooring isn't required. I was like, well, it's definitely been required on appraisals in the past. Maybe it's just, if it's just this small of a section, he was saying that the appraiser may just reduce the value of like the appraisal value by a little bit, and not call for the flooring to be finished prior to closing.
What I would say to that, Shawn, is first of all, we're taking pictures. So everybody looking at the report's going to see that the kitchen, in your example, doesn't have a finished floor covering. Yeah, there's a lot involved. How big is the house? What is the quality of construction? What is the overall value of the property? A 10 by 10 kitchen, 10 by 12 kitchen, 120, 150 square foot. You're looking at less than $500 for sure, unless you're going to put down, you know, marble with gold trim on it or something like that. But that is one thing that I would go back to the lender, for example, and say, okay, here's what I've got. The way that I would handle it is, and that's not necessarily deferred maintenance. Okay. That's just an unfinished floor. So what is the cost to cure? What is the cost to finish that floor? And I would include that in my physical depreciation. It's next to impossible to be able to measure in terms of market extraction or market reaction, how much an adjustment should be for that floor. In some cases, it wouldn't be anything. The market would be like, that's fine, I don't care, I'm going to put my own floor down. Well, we have to account for it. In a small kitchen, the adjustment is, it's not going to show up. It's not going to be measurable. I'm going to say in my improvement section at the bottom of the appraisal form, I'm going to say the kitchen floor covering is not completed, or the remodeling has been completed with the exception of the floor covering. The estimated cost to finish the floor is whatever it is, and this will be included with physical depreciation in the sales comparison approach. So what I've done is I've reported and alerted and disclosed you go to the sales comparison approach, and you're going to see age, 40, condition, average. If the comp is good, there's going to be a downward adjustment. But to actually be able to say, I'm adding a specific dollar amount into that physical depreciation for just the kitchen finished floor, that's really, it's not measurable. It's going to be insignificant. It wouldn't. Remember, now we're on a range of value as well. So if we're at a $250,000 house and I've got $230,000 to $260,000 for my comps, so we've got a $30,000, which is wide. Mine are really that wide, but my point is that $500 is not going to affect that range, if that makes sense. Let's see, what do I see? Allison's got a thing on her screen. Did she just opt out? Is that what we're doing?
What if in the contract, you know, like there is a concession for the flooring, is that considered any type of seller concession?
It depends on whether it's going to be completed before closing or after closing.
Yeah, we as the lender would just want it, I mean, like if it's done before closing, that's totally fine. Being done after closing, I mean, it'd just be easier, more than likely just to have the seller contribute $500 worth of buyer's closing costs and just let the buyer take care of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. What if they're
And-
contributing like a flooring concession?
Correct. If it's going to be done before closing, you would also want to try and have it done before the appraiser comes out, because if not, then everything's going to be good. They're just going to have to send me out to do an inspection, to take a picture and make sure the floor is done. And of course, that's an additional cost to the buyer. And it's not always going to be able, you're not always going to be able to have the floor covering done before the appraiser comes out. I get that. Just be aware that even if it's going to be done before closing, if it's not done when the appraiser comes out, the appraiser is going to have to come out again to do the final inspection or the completion inspection.
I was more asking like a monetary, concession, like it's not going to be completed at all. It's just going to be added, it pretty much takes away from closing costs, but it's a flooring concession. Like, they're not getting repaired before.
Again, what I'd have to say, and I don't mean to sound redundant, is if the appraiser comes out and the floor is not done, it's going to have to be done. The lender 9 times out of 10 is going to say, we want this to be done before closing. Now, they may do an escrow. Usually, sometimes they'll do a holdback. But at and again, $300, $400, $500 is not going to change the value. It's going to be more of disclosing that the floor is not done. Take a picture of it. They are going to do it, but it will not be done before closing or what have you. And then it becomes incumbent on the lender to decide, do they want it done before closing? Are they going to do a holdback? And for after closing, once it's done after closing, before they disperse that money, the appraiser is going to have to go back and re-inspect it. Is it going to affect the value? Again, it's not. It's probably not.
Yeah, we even did an escrow holdback for one on ours that you did the appraisal on, where the pool wasn't finished. We go back to them to finish the pool after, they did that several, I think like a month or two after the closing. So yeah, we'll definitely.
And of course, that's a big ticket item. We're talking, could be 10, 20, 30, $40,000 as opposed to a $400 or $500 floor.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
Your question here, how much does a water view count? Say a nice retention pond view versus a creek versus a
boy, there's a loaded question with a dozen different answers. We're supposed to be able to extract an adjustment from the market. The market always tells an appraiser what to do. The appraiser never tells the market what to do. Matter of fact, you guys, the sales agents and listing agents, have more to do with telling the market what to do than the appraiser does. Our job is to listen to the market. So if I'm going to take West Chase, for example. If I'm in West Chase and I'm in one of their small communities and there's 300 or 400 houses, and there is a retention pond inside that community. West Chase has a number of the little communities, and most of them have some form of retention pond. What the appraiser has to do is try and find recent sale of at least one property that's on a retention pond, as opposed to those that are not. And via what we call the method of paired sale analysis, we can extract that adjustment. So if I have one house that's on a retention pond and it's sold for $400,000 and everything else is similar, let's say I don't need to make any other adjustments. All the other houses sold for $380. What's the adjustment for the retention pond in that scenario?
20,000.
$20,000. That's not a guess. That's not an appraiser coming in and saying, well, yeah, usually it's $5,000. No, usually it's not $5,000. And with the market that we've just gone through and the adjustment and correction that's happening right now, it's vitally important that the appraiser not rely on a rule of thumb for any adjustment, whether it be gross living area, site size, view, location. A 1-car garage versus a 2-car garage can be the same thing. I can remember making adjustments between a 1 and a 2-car garage at $5,000. I've made them at $3,000. I've made them at $10,000. I've also made a 3-car garage to a 2-car garage, depending on the area. If it's an Avila or a Cheval or high-end neighborhood, that could be $20,000. It just all depends on what the market is paying for that difference in that neighborhood at that time. So I can't really tell you the adjustment that should be made between a creek and a non-creek, or a retention pond and a non-retention pond, a retention pond and a small fishing size lake, for example. Okay, not a ski size lake, but a fishing size lake that's natural, that's picturesque. It's got beautiful scenery, you know, cypress trees and all of the natural things that come with a Florida small pond or fishing lake, as opposed to a man-made retention pond, which we all know what those look like. It's a buffer, it's a nicer view. You don't have somebody right at your back door, but how much is somebody going to be willing to pay for a similar house on a pond if they can go down the street and get almost the same house for less money? Well, how much less? And that's where that's how we extract adjustment. It's called the paired sale analysis. And you're actually comparing comps to comps at that point, because the subject has this. One comp has something similar to the subject, but all the rest of the comps don't. So now we drop over, we completely put the subject property aside, and we go over to the comps and we start comparing the comps to each other. I'm going to assume that you're familiar with the sales comparison approach grid and what that looks like. Your CMA is very similar, although the CMA doesn't have lines for adjustments. It just, you list what it has, and then at the bottom, you say whatever you got to say. But when we make individual line adjustments, at the very bottom is where you have the adjusted sale price. You have the sale price up here, and you have the adjusted sale price down here. And you have your line adjustments in between for various differences of the items, that physical characteristics that materially affect market value. And so when you drop down to that bottom line and you see this one, like I said, that adjusted at 400,000 and all the rest of these at 380, okay, what's the difference? The only difference in this scenario is the one at 400,000 is on a retention pond. So that means $20,000 gets added to these 380, brings it up to 400,000. That's a very simple scenario. I wish it was like that all the time. It's not. It can be extremely complicated. Sometimes it takes me the shortest amount of time for me to do a standard subdivision sales comparison approach with 3 sales and 2 listings is an hour to an hour and a half, just on the sales comparison approach. That's a standard. If I get into a lake, a golf course, if I get into accessory dwellings, all of these other things, it can take me 2 to 3 hours to go through the process that is necessary to extract a supportable adjustment. And that's the key. We have to be able to support our adjustments. And again, jump in. I'm just going to keep kind of going here until I see a hand raised or somebody, Shawn, stops me. But One of the things that I do in my practice is I'm a qualified expert witness in Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Orange County Family Court and Bankruptcy Court. Divorce, bankruptcy, estate settlement, probate, all of that. I get called in to testify. I had better be able to show my work and support my adjustments, or the opposing attorney or judge will be able to discredit my testimony immediately. The instant out of my mouth comes, I relied on somebody else's work, that's it, I'm done. Because that somebody else's work could be wrong. It could be egregiously wrong. It could be maybe just a little bit wrong. But the bottom line is I've just admitted that I didn't do my own work. So for me personally, I'm going to do everything that is necessary to, if the Florida Real Estate Appraisal Board comes knocking on my door and they want to see a work file, or I get called into the hot seat in Orlando, which y'all have a hot seat over there as well. If I can't support and show in my work file what I've done, not just the appraisal, but my work file as well, big problems, big problems.
Michael, I'm pretty sure you did the appraisal, and it was a buyer of mine, and he ended up having electrical issues with the type of electrical box in the house after the closing, and he was basically coming, I think he came back and saying the appraiser should have noticed that the type of electrical box that was in here was not, I think it was you, maybe it wasn't, you know, what wasn't like the updated model that was supposed to be in the house.
I've heard the scenario, yes. That is beyond the, we're not electricians.
Yeah.
I'm gonna immediately say that is beyond the scope of the appraiser's experience and knowledge. You know, again, converted garage, this is one of the things that would tell you this was a converted garage. Probably the only thing is my panel right here. I don't go into everybody's house into the garage and open up that panel and look. Having said that, if I'm in a historic house that was built, you know, 1880, 1900, 1920, I'm going to start paying a little bit closer attention to things. I did some remodeling and some updating and renovating in Seminole Heights and Palmacia back in the late 80s, early 90s. So I do have a little bit of background in that arena. But at the same time, I'm not an electrician. So that's when, if I see something, I may call for an electrical inspection by a licensed contractor. But to just automatically in my report or verbally say, this electrical panel is going to cause a fire because it's not updated or doesn't have the, I don't know that. I don't know that. The old knob and tube, do any of you all know what knob and tube wiring means?
Yeah.
Back in the day, when electricity was first discovered, that's one of the, there are wires that are in your walls, and they have these porcelain, little white porcelain cylinders that the wire runs through. I guess it's some kind of conductor or something. And you have a cloth or the wiring is wrapped by something other than what is used today, obviously. But I can't see that. I don't know what's behind that. I'll ask, has the knob and tube been replaced out of here? And if they say no, I'm going to disclose that in my report, because, and that'll never pass FHA, VA, USDA.
What about like polybutylene piping? What are you guys doing on that right now?
The what?
The polybutylene piping, plumbing?
I don't ever see an appraiser making a mention of that. I mean, it may come up on the 4-point inspection, and the insurance agent may want it updated, but I never see it.
Right, that's what I've had,
Where-
like,
yeah.
it's the insurance made us update it, but I didn't know
Yeah.
if they call it
I'm gonna turn it in a vacant house, whether it's conventional or FHA. In a vacant house, almost all my lenders want me to test the electric, the plumbing, the air conditioning, because they want to make sure that that's working. So I'll turn the sinks on and take a picture of the water coming out. I may let them run a little bit to make sure that there's no leak. Dishwashers are infamous for having leaks. And so that's one of the reasons why specifically with FHA, we have to turn that dishwasher on and let it run. I'm not going to stay there for an hour and watch it cycle through every cycle. They don't expect us to do that. But the only plumbing that I get exposed to is if I open up below the sink, I can see the plumbing under there. And if it's leaking, the deck under the sink is destroyed. It's got water damage and all of that, or not, whatever the case may be. And then the water heater. Let me say in this water heater situation.
We got 2 questions after that.
Okay. You can Google the Florida Building Code, Chapter 5, water heaters, and read all about it. But the biggest thing that there's 2 things with water heaters that I run across: the wiring coming out of the top and the pressure release safety valve is not piped according to code, which is required to be piped down to within 6 inches of the floor. That is because if somebody's in close proximity and that thing blows, they're going to get scalded with hot water. So that's a safety issue. The wiring coming out of the top should be in, I just had the word on the tip of my tongue.
Flatting.
It's
Conduit.
Conduit. Thank you. Sometimes it's not always in conduit, but yet it's not anchored in the top in such a way that somebody can't accidentally something fall in there and get electrocuted or cause a short. So, but those are the 2 things with water heaters that I run into that I would encourage all of you, before an appraiser comes out, no matter whether it's conventional or not, look at that water heater and see if it's to code, because if it's not, that's a trigger right there. It's going to be a subject to the appraiser's going to have to come back. It could cause a delay, etc.
Where'd you say the valve should be?
The what?
The valve.
The water pressure release valve.
Yeah.
They're located in 2 places. One coming directly out of the top, and it's like a hose bib. It's like a faucet on the side of the house. Okay. That's got to be piped over and down to within 6 inches. The other kind comes out of the side, and it looks just like your hose bib on the side of the house. That has to have a fitting on it and then pipe down to within 6 inches of the floor.
The first question we have here, it says new construction builders have been using creative pricing by offering large concessions instead of price reductions. How do you account for this in your appraisal? So like $1 credit concession.
I'll use a hyphenated 1 word: resales. Resales. Most lenders require at least 1 resale and at least 1 comp that's from a different builder. That probably gives you all an aha moment just from what I just said: a resale and a comp from a different builder. Because if you use all the same comps from the same builder and he's building all of these concessions and costs in, you're not getting true market value. You're getting what that builder wants the market value to be. Does that make sense? So if we're in a subdivision where they're building houses and they're built 2022, there's 2023 under construction, or 2021, and then it closes in 2022. And we can see the concessions in the contract, but we can't see, like you're saying and suggesting, that all these other things are going on behind the scenes that may not be in the contract. It could be upgrades. It could be, I don't know, a number of things. But the instant we go and use that resale comp from a house that was built in 2019, maybe 2020, now none of that stuff exists in that sale. Does that make sense? So we're able to see, just like the scenario I gave you with the retention pond a little bit ago, If we have a builder sale at 540, and okay, he's doing 15,000 in closing costs. Well, if I have a couple of resales of his same house that he built 2 years ago, but now it's coming up as a resale and it's sold at 510 or 515, what is the market extracted adjustment for all of those concessions and all of those things? The difference between 515 and 540 or $25,000. So yes, that will be deducted for sure. So in your arena, if you're pricing or you're representing a buyer, be aware of that, because if you go back and look at those resales that have taken place, now you have some legitimate supportable ammunition to walk into these people's office and say, look, this same house that you built 2 years ago just resold and it's $30,000 less. It's really been only lived in 1 year. There's no physical depreciation to speak of. Has there been a significant increase in materials during that year? Labor? The answer is yes, but we need to be able to see that. I need to be able to support and explain why that is there. And if it's not supportable and explainable, then it's not going to get adjusted for. It's not going to be accounted for. And your value is going to end up coming in low. So in the new construction thing, be very careful. Don't use all comps that are new houses by the same builder. Always look for one resale or two, and always pull something from a different builder in that community if possible, and do your comparison. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
I think it was good. We had another question here. It says, do you choose to adjust a home in the neighborhood under a mile to the subject home before you go past a mile to find a very similar home, especially like a 2-story versus a 1-story, or an odd thing like a log cabin versus a normal home? If there are no other cabins, even 10 miles away, or no homes sold in the neighborhood that are a 2-story in the past year, only 1-story, or do you go out further than a mile or 2 miles?
All right, let me start with the log cabin thing. Obviously, they're few and far between. I have done, for example, I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Northdale, Lake LeClaire area. There is a 2-story, full-blown log house. I'm not going to call it a log cabin. I'm going to call it a log house. Excuse me. And it's situated on 1.5 acres. And so what I started with is, and I use the funnel as my visual for you. Look at what a funnel is. Down at the bottom, it's this big around. At the top, it's this big around. You always start at the bottom, no matter what it is, whether you're in Palma Seca, Hyde Park, Cheval, Avila, Plant City, excuse me. That's the tail end of my cold creeping up. Hang on just a second. Okay. So I start at the bottom of the funnel and I start spreading out and spreading out, spreading out and spreading out and spreading out. In this scenario that I did, I think I had a comp that was 25 miles. Well, in that scenario, what the lender's looking for is market demonstration or market acceptance of a log house or a log cabin. So it doesn't matter how far you go, but you have to be able to extract a location adjustment if it differs. So in my scenario, Northdale, Lake LeClaire is very close in. 25 miles out, or actually one of them was even up in the Quail Hollow area of Wesley Chapel. Completely different location, right? So in order to adjust for that, I had to first figure out how much the land values were in each area. And then after all of my adjustments were made, if there's a difference between the one in Dover, the one in Plant City, the one in Wesley Chapel, then I have to pull in and be able to support a location adjustment for that.
And,
Now-
so you absolutely need one log cabin comp, because I know you've got a couple of these deals in mind over the years. You need
Right.
at least one log cabin comp comparable sale if the subject of log cabin.
Yes, and I would prefer, well, let me expand a little bit on that, but then I'll segue, I'll segue into the rest of the question. Whether it's one story or two story, very, very rare am I able to extract an adjustment between a one story and a two story house. Okay, it happens, but it's extremely rare. Having said that, the difference between a mile and a mile and a half and 2 miles, most of the time, well, let me just explain it this way, because this is something that I want real estate agents to understand as best as possible. One of the first things that the appraiser has to do is establish what is the neighborhood. What are the neighborhood boundaries? Okay, it's not just going to be VanDyk, Dale Mabry, Ehrlich, and Hutchinson Road. It's, matter of fact, it's never it. What do I use? I use school district boundaries. Okay. Stand by. All right, sorry about that. Hillsborough County Schools has a website that you can Google in, Hillsborough County School Locator. Then you put in the address and it'll bring up all 3 grade schools for that address: elementary, middle, and high school. And I will look at each one of those and it shows the subject property on that map in relation to the school district boundaries. Rarely is, most of the time I use elementary and high school. The middle school, and you'll see this, I encourage you to go look at this, and I don't know why Hillsborough County does this, but for middle school, their school districts are split up and sometimes are miles apart from each other. I don't know why they do that, but they do. So middle school, elementary school and high schools are the most consistent, and I use that as a basis, not the exact boundaries, but as a basis. So if somebody comes to me and said, why did you choose this area? Well, because it's part of this school district. Then you have zoning and you have other things, and yes, you do have monuments, highways, rivers, all of these things can come into play. The point I'm trying to make is, let me just say this, never use radius. On the MLS, when you put in an address, you have the option to go a quarter mile, half mile, 1 mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles, and it's a radius. Okay, it's round and it's going to pull in areas that should not be pulled in, or it's going to leave out areas that should be pulled in. Does that make sense? So I use the polygon draw feature based on the school district boundary and my experience and my knowledge of the area. And I will actually draw what my neighborhood boundaries are. 9 times out of 10, if my property's dead center, which usually it's not, it's somewhere else, it's more than a mile. It can be 2 miles. If I'm at the far northeast section of what I've defined as a neighborhood, and it's 4 miles, and I got comps down here, those could be 2 miles. but I will explain in the report, they're within the area research, the neighborhood is defined. There's no support for location adjustment, or there may be, Lord knows, you get down in South Tampa, how many pockets are there in South Tampa? You know, the Plant High School District, it's full of pockets, and you have to know what those pockets are, why they are, like the Dale Mabry Elementary School District over in West Shore, for example. To use y'all's words, highly sought after. Okay, yeah, we as appraisers should know that. You as real estate agents should know that. So don't get caught up in the mile or the half mile or the 2 miles, but be very careful if you just do a radius, because if you do a radius in South Tampa and you're on McDill Avenue next to the Palmacia Golf Course and you do a radius, you're going to pull in the golf course to the west, Bayshore Boulevard to the east, significant differences, but then don't forget it's also going north and south, which is not going to be comparable with the east and west. So I would highly encourage you not to use the radius feature, but to actually define boundaries based on something. Hillsborough River, for example, running between Seminole Heights on the east and Wellswood, for example, on the west. Obviously, it's not apples to apples. It's not comparable. So the Hillsborough River is a boundary, but guess what? The Hillsborough High School District spills over to the other side of the Hillsborough River. Okay, so at that point, you can't just rely on that school district in and of itself. A similar thing happens with Chamberlain. So it gets tricky. For y'all's purposes, you do what it is that you do, and you come up with the comps that you come up with, but you need to know that when you get that contract and somebody comes into Shawn's office and applies for that mortgage loan, the next thing that's going to happen is the appraiser is going to come out there, and the appraiser's boundaries may not be anywhere close to what you all are thinking the boundaries are, because we have to support. We're going to be held accountable. We have to use the words northeast, south, and west. The reviewers have software. The underwriters have software that if their software doesn't pick up north, south, east, and west, it kicks the appraisal out and it comes back to us. And then we have to be specific with what our boundaries are. Sometimes there could be, you know, if you get a step effect, you got 5 different north boundaries. Does that make sense? You may have 1 east, 3 south, 1 or 2 west. Well, we can't fit all that in there. We either do an addendum, or sometimes I'll put multiple boundaries north, Hillsborough River east, Columbus Boulevard south, and Havana Avenue west. But the point is, it's got to be defined. You can't, how do you define a radius? You can't define a circle. There's no, it doesn't stop. There's no north, south, east, and west. So appraisers never use a circle or a radius. I would rather you stay in the subdivision, do a subdivision search first, and then start spreading out. And if there's nothing there, you keep spreading and spreading. But at some point, let me kind of wrap this all up. At some point, what I will have to do is I will take comps from in that community that are close, because you're going to have location that's the same. You're probably going to have site size that's the same. You're probably going to have year built that's similar. And I'm going to take 3 of the best that I can get, because now I don't have to make adjustment for location. I don't have to make adjustment for site. I don't have to make adjustment for age. And then I'm going to go somewhere else and pull in real similar, physically similar houses, same bedrooms, bathrooms, gross living, or similar bedrooms, bathrooms, gross living area, garages, porches, pools. And what's the difference going to be? 9 times out of 10, it's going to be location, maybe site size, maybe view, but it may take 6 comps, 3 right there to demonstrate location, and 3 outside to demonstrate physical characteristics. that's a very time consuming scenario that can take hours. But in order to be able to support your work, that's what we have to do. Any other questions on that? Did I cover all of the questions?
This was amazing.
Say that again.
You were amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Text me. I want to make sure I answered this properly. They were asking when it comes to a garage conversion, if it was not permitted, and not being used as additional square footage, but doesn't also have functional use of a garage. Is there an adjustment for something like that, or is it still viewed as a garage for additional purposes? So what I had said was, in some cases, the appraiser would still use it for extra storage. In some cases, if it still has a garage door on it, we've had the drywall removed in the past, and basically, even though there was still drywall in the garage, the drywall was removed from in front of the garage door, and that was fine. Sometimes the appraiser can do it as storage, and it isn't necessarily required that there has to be permits pulled for a garage conversion. That isn't required, as long as it's streamlined with the rest of the house and it looks normal, right?
In terms of a bonus room, yes.
And there's enough air conditioning capacity.
Well, but here's in the extreme scenario, let's say the garage is enclosed into a master bedroom or another bedroom, ensuite bathroom. All bedrooms have to have windows. So how many garages have windows? Not very many. Point being, if it is converted, if it is enclosed and it's turned into a bedroom and a bathroom and there's no window, I automatically know it wasn't done to code, because the building department's going to require a window as part of the permit. Certainly FHA, HUD, USDA, VA, that's and I made that mistake early on. The reason why it's so prevalent in my mind, because I got called out and said, well, there's no window for emergency escape. Okay, well, that was a big learning experience for me back in the day. The air conditioning thing, again, what does it look like when you step down? Okay, so first thing is you're stepping down. That doesn't necessarily eliminate it from being living area, but now you've got a floor elevation change. It's not the same level, you're stepping down. It could have the exact same floor covering as the rest of the house. Is the attic scuttle or pull down stair still on the ceiling? Is there a window? Has it been drywalled? And has there been electric added to where it's not in the wall? You have a wire coming out of the box, it comes down and it's in conduit along the outside of the wall, okay, which is fine, but was it permitted? Because at that point we know that electrical was done after the fact and was a licensed electrician involved. So there really are a number of things that come into play with the conversions of the garage. Most everybody leaves the front door on, the garage door on. And what I have found over the years is that's for aesthetic purposes. They want it to look like all the rest of the houses in the neighborhood. You get into functional obsolescence. If you're in a neighborhood, I'll just pick West Chase again, or Carrollwood Village, or any of these big communities where everybody has at least a 2-car garage or a 3-car garage. Well, you're driving down the street and all of a sudden you see a house that's got 2 windows and a flat wall that you know used to be a garage. Well, aesthetically, it's different. It may stick out. It may not. It just all depends. We all see things differently. But when you go on the inside of that, if it's finished off, it's permitted, everything, you walk in there and you cannot tell it used to be a garage except for the driveway out front, I'm all about that. But guess what? You're going to have a limited market for that house, because everybody that's going to move into that neighborhood 9 times out of 10 is going to want a garage for their cars and their toys and their stuff. And it's gone. So Now, what I have to do is try and find at least one recent sale of a house in that community who's got a converted garage.
And there's probably not gonna be any.
Or I'm not going to be able to come up with an adjustment. On the other hand, and I have to go into public records with this part because there's no search engine. I mean, there's a garage and carport search engine in the MLS, or you can say none. But I don't know how many other houses in there, and I'm not going to take 2 hours to drive every single street in this neighborhood looking for another house that's, you know, had their garage door removed. So I'll go into the IMAP feature, or it's easiest to do the IMAP feature in MLS, because that way you can pull up an entire subdivision. It may bring up 300 houses, but you can then flip through those and see which one has the word no next to the garage. And if there's 300 houses and all 300 of them have garages, and I've got one that doesn't, I have to disclose, I have to try and determine what impact on marketability is this one house that doesn't have a garage gonna, you know, is somebody gonna be gonna pull up in front of it and say, oh, it doesn't have a garage, and we don't even want to look at this house. You keep on going.
And all the other houses are 2,800 square feet, and this house is 3,500 square feet.
And yeah, that's exactly right, because now you've added 4 or 5, 550, 600 square feet, which could possibly put it into the over improvement category. It gets complicated. It gets complicated, and we can't always support an adjustment. I have turned in reports before disclosing and stating and taking pictures of, but then turn around and said, I have no market data from which to extract an adjustment for this physical characteristic that may or may not have an impact on marketability and value. Well, how far do you think that's going to get past an underwriter? You know, that'll fly through a divorce proceeding or a bankruptcy or an estate all day long, because that's not their concern. That's not a guideline. That's not an issue. But in the lending arena, if that lender has to take that property back, what are they going to be left with? What are they going to have to deal with to sell that, knowing it's already an REO Banco property and the sharks are in the water, just circling, waiting to pounce on a low ball issue? So we have to let the lenders know what's there, and try to support the adjustment for it. I can't just say, well, typically I'd make a $10,000 adjustment for a 2-car garage versus no garage. Well, where did I come up with that $10,000? And if I don't have it in my work file, or if I can't support it in the appraisal, then I've made an unsupportable, basically a WAG. Have y'all heard the expression WAG before?
No.
I don't know if I should. I don't know. It's a wild ass guess. WAG. Okay. That never allowed to use the WAG theory, and unfortunately, my colleagues, so I've heard, use that quite often. It's pulling something out of the air. It's now, if I have done appraisals in that neighborhood, I'm going to use Seminole Heights, and boy, did this trigger something that I'd like to go into if we got time, if you guys are interested to hear this. But if I go into Seminole Heights and I have all these different things, and Lord knows they're everywhere, there's so many variables and so many different properties in that area. If I have in a previous appraisal report been able to extract that adjustment, then I can reference that adjustment from that appraisal in this report. Okay. But if I haven't, I can't just guess and say, well, you know, I kind of feel like a 2-car garage is 20,000 and a 1-car garage is 5. So I'm going to make a $15,000 adjustment. Okay, great. Mr. Appraiser, what did you base that adjustment on? You know, dead in the water right off the bat. Let me, this is something it's not a pet peeve of mine. It actually makes me upset, and I want to address it specifically with you all. I have a lot of pet peeves, but this is a real legitimate situation that causes at least this appraiser much grief and adds a significant amount of data research and analysis time to my report. Garage apartments, guest quarters, in-law apartments, carriage houses. There are a number of ways to identify these accessory use dwellings, or ADUs, accessory dwelling uses, whatever they call them out there. Here's my point. They are never allowed to be included in the gross living area and the room count of the house. Ever, never, ever. So when I'm putting in my MLS search engine, a 3-bedroom, 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, built in 1910 to 1940 on, less than a quarter-acre lot. I'm really narrowing this thing down. It's the funnel theory again. You start at the bottom and move up. So I get, let's say, 25 hits. Great. So now I start looking at them in a little bit more detail, because I need to whittle this 25 down to 6, 7, 8, or 9. I never go into the neighborhood when I'm doing an inspection with less than 7 or 8 comps, unless they just don't exist. Because I that's just me. I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. But wrapping this up, I'll go out and I'll take a picture and everything looks great. It looks like a great comp, and I get back and I pull it up and I start filling in my line, my sales comparison approach grid. And I'm looking at this, and all of a sudden I see down at the bottom, there's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath garage apartment or guest house, and it's 850 square feet, or it's 300 square feet. Maybe that's a better example. So my 1,500 square foot house that you told me was the square footage that my 3-bedroom, my search engine picked up, is a 3-bedroom, 1,500 square foot house built 1910 to 1940 and all these other things. Oh no, it's only a 2-1, 1,100 square feet. And it has a guest quarter or garage. And my subject doesn't have a guest quarter or an in-law apartment or a garage apartment. And it's okay, that was a huge waste of time. I can't use that comp. Appraisers are never, excuse me, appraisers are never allowed to include, even if it's attached. Okay. If you can't access that, whatever you want to call it, from inside the house, we're never allowed to include it in our gross living area or our room count. Okay. Could I ask you guys to not do that, to follow suit? If you want to, if you're going to put 3-2, but it's really a 2-1 with a guest apartment, a lot of times in the opening line of your description, you might say, the house is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, whatever. But the square footage that you put square feet heated, please don't include that other unit in your square footage. Well, and I can hear some of the groans, not necessarily from y'all, but with that makes the house look bigger, and it justifies the value, and it makes the price per square foot more consistent, and all these other things, which, by the way, price per square foot is never, ever, ever part of the appraisal process either. We don't make adjustments for it. I don't even know why it's on the form in the sales comparison approach, other than maybe somebody might want to see the subject's price per square foot somewhere in that. But there's so many different things that affect the price per square foot. It's really, in the appraisal arena, it's meaningless. So all of these things cause, at least this appraiser, could be hours in additional research and analysis and number crunching, only to find out that this isn't a valid comp. And so it gets kicked to the curb. On the flip side, putting one picture in to a comp that otherwise looks valid, and I call you and I can't get in touch with you to ask you what's on the inside, because I see one picture in the MLS and I drove by it and I see the front and the sides. I'll do the aerial, maybe get some semblance from the aerial of what's in the backyard, but it may look like a great comp. But if I can't establish if there's and support an adjustment, say for remodeling, even if you say in your comments, completely remodeled house, this, and this, but there's one picture, I can't use that, because if I'm called to account, I've got to be able to say that I verified that, I confirmed that. I spoke with the listing agent who said, yes. We all make mistakes. I've come across a number of mistakes in the public comments in the MLS, drop down to the realtor remarks that are not public. And that's usually where agents disclose a sinkhole. I don't know why. It should be right here up top in big bold letters, sinkhole remediated 10 years ago, or unremediated sinkhole, something that is going to alert me on a cursory review of your listing that there's been a sinkhole. Now I have to do all of this and come all the way down at the bottom, and then there may be a line that says settlement or subsidence was remediated or mitigated at such and such a time. And I don't always have time at the beginning of an assignment or research of my comps to thoroughly dissect all the information in your MLS listing. Most of the time that comes when I'm trying to decide whether I want to use it as a comp in my report or not. It's a process of elimination, and listen, date of sale. Now it's more prevalent than ever because of the changing of the market. I still will use a sale that's 9, 10, 11 months old, even 12 months old. But there has to be a very legitimate reason why I'm doing that. Because if there aren't recent sales, and go back to a scenario that I mentioned a little while ago, if there aren't recent sales, the first thing the underwriter says is, what's going on in this area? Nothing has sold in the past 6 months, for example. Well, I don't necessarily have the answer to why that is. But what I do have to do is go somewhere close by with a similar house or something and pull in a recent sale to determine whether or not a time adjustment is supportable. Prices risen? Are they stable now? Have they declined? I would like to say that across the board, the market is stabilized, but it hasn't. There are some areas where prices are still increasing. There are anomalies to where sale prices are declining, but list prices are increasing. And vice versa, where sale prices are increasing, list prices are declining. Market times, obviously they're getting a little bit longer depending on where the property is. For my practice in late July of 2022, that was probably when interest rates started creeping up, Shawn, into the 6s?
Yeah.
Initially 5 and 6s. Okay, so it started slowing down. And then, it didn't really come to a screeching halt, but it came pretty close. And there's been an adjustment. There's been a correction. I'm sure many of you are wanting to hear some discussion about this coming out of my mouth. Is where do I think the market's going? Where has it been? Well, we all kind of know where it's been.
Michael, let's try to, we're a little over an hour. Try to wrap this up like in the next few minutes.
Sure. I'll make this, I'll wrap it up. This will be the last thing we talk about.
And I put Michael's contact information in the chat, but any of you can email us and I can get you his information to do private appraisals as well too, for cash buyers, pre-appraisals for sellers, pre-listing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do a lot of pre-listing work. I have a lot of agents that are clients. Pre-listing work. I've got one going right now that's a cash deal in Oldsmar where everybody's all freaked out about the sale price and the asking price and what the neighborhood is, and it's a complicated deal. But so yes, I do all of those, and I can get images of my business cards to you guys.
Yeah,
for sure.
We can send it out. So we're recording this. We'll have Gabriella send your contact info for who attended. So yeah, just wrap up this last part you were talking about.
Yeah. So obviously interest rates have a big impact on the market. There's still evidence of remodeling and renovation. I do flip. I have some clients that do flips, and I've got one working right now. As a matter of fact, with that, I'm doing an as-is value and an as-repaired value. They want to know, well, what's it worth now? And here's a list of what we're going to do. So tell me what it's going to be worth when we're finished. We can do all of that. It's complicated, but it appears that the adjustment has occurred. The market is kind of stable to a certain extent. It has picked up again, at least with me. And again, you know, I have a lot of different clients, so I'm not necessarily the one to gauge whether the market's hot or cold, or it's busy or it's slow, because I do so much non-lending work as well. I'm always busy, which is a good thing for me. But I'm not making adjustments for time, positive or negative. Seller concessions have returned on virtually every deal, where for 2.5 years we didn't see them. I did have one yesterday where there's, believe it or not, there's a gap clause, $5,000 gap clauses. So it's still, you know, kind of, yeah, when I put it in those terms, it doesn't indicate stability, but yet at the same time, what we're returning to what it was pre-COVID, may be the best way to explain it, where it's a steady flow, concessions are back, everybody's values have at least doubled in the last 2.5 years. Everybody across the board, that's what we're seeing. So everybody's got a ton of equity in their property. That's usually a plus when it comes to selling, and they're not worried about losing $5,000 or $10,000 in concessions because, you know, they've got $200,000 in equity. So there's a lot of positives out there that are going on right now, but we appraisers, we don't have a crystal ball. Any projections that we make is based on historical data. So if that historical data is no good, then our projection is no good. But we have to do the best we can to explain that. So it's there's nothing easy about it. It's a challenge. There are still times when, even after 44 years, depending on the property, I feel a sense of intimidation because there's a lot riding on my $1.5 million value, for example. And sometimes those are the easiest appraisals. It's the 2-bedroom, 1-bath, $280,000 appraisal, depending on where it is, property that can be more challenging than $1.5 million. It just there's a lot of variables involved from the appraisal side. So thank you guys again. I mean, we could go on. We could go on, literally. There's so much involved. I've gone 3 hours when I've come into a classroom or training room session. So we've covered a lot of ground in an hour. Let's do it again for sure.
Yes, definitely. So we'll have you going again in the future. And yeah, thank you for everybody that attended.
Yes.
Yeah.
Appreciate you guys very much.
Yeah. Gabriella, you can stop the recording now. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Well, an agent did have a question here.
Okay.